It's 1941. In the heart of the Mediterranean, an Italian plane is flying straight toward the steel and fire of the Royal Navy. All around, the sky is a deadly trap of tracer bullets, the air torn apart by anti-aircraft explosions. For anyone else, it would be a suicide mission. But at the controls of that Savoia Marchetti SM-79 is a man whose audacity is already a legend. Carlo Emanuele Buscaglia. He isn't just attacking, he's dancing with death, skimming the surface of the water to drop a torpedo that could change the tide of the battle. But how did a young pilot from Novara become the nightmare of the world's most powerful fleet? How could one man, in a single plane, challenge an entire empire? This isn't just the story of a soldier. It's the chronicle of the exploits of an ace, a master of the deadliest weapon in the Royal Italian Air Force, and his destiny inextricably linked with that of his nation. This is the story of Carlo Emanuele Buscaglia. Carlo Emanuele Buscaglia was born in Novara on September 22, 1915, in an Italy still echoing with the Great War and heading toward a turbulent future. From a young age, he showed a strong interest in military life, a calling that seemed written in his destiny. After high school and a brief stint studying law at university, he realized his place wasn't in a courtroom, but above the clouds. The call of the sky was too strong. In October 1934, at 19, he entered the prestigious Orion course at the Royal Air Force Academy. There, amid strict discipline and flying lessons, the young Buscaglia forged his character. He wasn't like the other cadets. He immediately showed a natural talent for piloting, a gift his instructors noticed right away. In 1936, he earned his pilot's license, and a few months later, his military pilot's license. The wings he had always dreamed of were finally his. Promoted to second lieutenant in 1937, he was assigned to the 50th Bombardment Squadron of the 32nd Wing. Initially, he flew the three-engine Savoia Marchetti SM-81, but he soon transitioned to the more modern SM-79 Sparviero, the plane that would become the symbol of his exploits. In those years, Buscaglia didn't just learn to fly a bomber, he learned to feel it as an extension of his own body. Every bolt, every vibration of the engine became a part of him. To see him, he seemed like any other officer, a 22-year-old serving his country. But beneath the uniform lay a glacial determination, waiting for the right moment to explode. That moment arrived with the roar of the cannons, announcing the Second World War. When Italy entered the war in June 1940, the Royal Air Force faced an enormous challenge, countering British naval dominance in the Mediterranean. Traditional high-altitude bombing had proven ineffective against nimble and well-defended ships. Something new was needed, a weapon that could strike the enemy below the waterline. And so, almost as a gamble, the torpedo bomber specialty was born. The idea of launching a torpedo from a plane wasn't new, but putting it into practice was another story, full of unknowns and dangers. Many strategists were skeptical. They thought a heavy plane, forced to fly low and slow, would be an easy target. A first, tragic deployment during the Battle of Punta Stilo seemed to prove them right. Many planes were shot down without results. The project seemed destined to fail. But where many saw a dead end, some saw an opportunity. It was a matter of tactics, training, and, above all, courage. In July 1940, at the Gorizia airfield, the experimental torpedo bomber unit was established. It was a group of pioneers, volunteers chosen from among the best pilots. Among them was a young 25-year-old lieutenant, transferred there just 2 weeks after the disaster at Punta Stilo, Carlo Emanuele Buscaglia. For him, this wasn't a punishment, but a calling. He immediately understood the devastating potential of this tactic. The plane became a surgical weapon. The training was grueling. Learning to fly a heavy SM-79 just a few meters above the sea, calculating the perfect release point while the enemy fired at you, required nerves of steel. The unit, with just 5 crews, was soon transferred to Libya, ready for its first mission. It was August 1940. The objective, the naval base of Alexandria, Egypt. Under a scorching sunset, the 5 cursed hunchbacks, as the British called the SM-79s for their shape, took off into the unknown. At the controls of one of those planes, ready to write his legend, was Lieutenant Buscaglia. The night of August 15, 1940, marked Buscaglia's baptism by fire. The attack on Alexandria was a daring action that, despite not yielding spectacular results, showed that striking the enemy fleet was possible. From that moment on, Buscaglia's name became synonymous with terror for British convoys. He didn't seek easy targets. His preferred prey were the large warships. His technique was a mix of calculation, intuition, and inhuman courage. As he himself said, during an attack, there is only one thing: the objective. You ignore the enemy fire, you ignore everything else. There is only the ship and the exact point where the torpedo must strike. And his torpedoes struck. On September 17, 1940, during a torpedo action, a hit was scored that severely damaged the heavy cruiser HMS Kent. On December 3rd, in an attack on Suda Bay in Crete, the cruiser HMS Glasgow was hit and put out of action, an action in which Buscaglia participated with his wingman, Irasi. His name began to echo in war communiques. Promoted to captain for wartime merit at just 25, he took command of the 281st Torpedo Bomber Squadron in Rhodes in March 1941. From there, he led his men, who revered him, in a series of deadly attacks. His squadron became a thorn in the side of British routes to Egypt and Malta. Every convoy knew that Buscaglia's hunchbacks could appear out of nowhere, skimming the water. On September 27th, during Operation Halberd, the Italian torpedo bombers achieved a great success, severely damaging the battleship HMS Nelson. In April 1942, promoted again, he took command of the 132nd Independent Torpedo Bomber Group. It was the pinnacle of his career. He now led an entire elite unit. During the Battle of mid-June in 1942, Buscaglia and his men wrote an epic chapter. For days, they launched themselves against the convoys heading to Malta, and on June 14th, he personally led the attack. By the end of his career as a torpedo bomber, the official bulletin of the Royal Air Force would credit him with the sinking of over 100,000 tons of enemy shipping. It was an impressive result that turned him into a living legend, the ace of aces, the greatest ship hunter the skies had ever seen. Being an ace didn't just mean being an incredible pilot. For Buscaglia, it meant above all being a commander. His greatness wasn't just in hitting a target, but in leading other men to do the same, risking their lives every time. When he took command of the 281st Squadron, he didn't simply inherit a unit, he created it. He shaped it with his example and his vision. Buscaglia was a born leader. He demanded the maximum because he, first and foremost, gave his all. He was the first to take off and the last to return. In briefings, his calmness instilled confidence even in the youngest pilots. Every plan was studied in minute detail, but in flight, his instinct prevailed. That almost supernatural ability to read the battle. His men, pilots like Fagioni, Cimici, and Graziani, were not mere subordinates, but brothers in arms with blind trust in him. They knew that Buscaglia would never send them on a hopeless mission, and if it were, he would be there, at the front, to face the fire first. The famous photo of him in Gadura, in the center of his pilots, is the perfect image of a commander and his gang. When he was entrusted with the 132nd Group in 1942, his responsibility grew. He managed to transform the group into the sharpest instrument of the Royal Air Force. His successes were their successes. He was the commander everyone wanted to follow into battle. That's why, when his plane didn't return from that fatal mission, it was an immense shock for his men. They hadn't just lost a commander, but their guide. November 1942. Operation Torch had brought the Allies to North Africa. For the Italian Air Force and Navy, there was only one order: attack the invasion fleet at all costs. Major Buscaglia and his 132nd Group were called to accomplish the impossible. On November 11th, a first daylight attack against the fleet in Bougie Bay, Algeria, proved to be a near-suicidal action. The enemy's reaction was too violent. Despite the risk, Buscaglia decided to try again the next day, November 12th. He knew what awaited him, an inferno. But the sight of the enemy ships was an irresistible call. As his formation approached, it was intercepted by enemy fighters. His plane, the lead one, became the main target. Hit multiple times, his hunchback caught fire. With one wing ablaze, anyone else would have given up. But not him. In a final desperate act of courage, he flew toward the target. While his plane was a flying torch, he dropped the torpedo against a large steamship, which was hit. Immediately after, his SM-79 crashed into the sea and exploded. His men watched the scene, helpless. For them, their commander was dead. War communique number 901 read, "Major Carlo Emanuele Buscaglia did not return to base. He was declared missing and posthumously awarded the Gold Medal of Military Valor. Italy mourned its hero. But his story wasn't over. In reality, he had been thrown from the plane and, severely wounded and burned, was rescued by an enemy ship. He was a prisoner. The ace of the skies was presumed dead, but he was still alive. Captured and severely wounded, Buscaglia began a long ordeal. He moved from one field hospital to another as doctors fought to save his life. During interrogations, he refused to give any information. His true identity remained a mystery for months, until it was discovered that this prisoner was none other than the legendary Major Buscaglia. He was transferred to the United States, to the Crossville prisoner of war camp. There, among the other Italian officers, the news that Buscaglia was alive spread with disbelief. In Italy, he was already a symbol, so much so that a torpedo bomber group of the newly formed Republican Air Force in the north already bore his name. On September 8, 1943, the armistice changed everything. Italy was split in two. Prisoners were given a choice: remain loyal to Salo or fight with the Allies. For Buscaglia, a soldier loyal to the oath he had made to the king, the choice was as immediate as it was painful. He decided to return to fight for the Kingdom of the South with the Italian co-belligerent Air Force. It was a decision that labeled him a traitor in the eyes of some of his former comrades. At the end of June 1944, Buscaglia returned to Italy. He was a man marked in body and soul, but his desire to fly was intact. He was offered command of a new unit, the Baltimore Wing, equipped with American bombers. A new challenge, a new aircraft. It seemed that fate had granted him a second chance. August 1944. The Campo Vesuvio airfield near Naples was a makeshift base. This is where Buscaglia's Baltimore Wing was located. The men were getting familiar with the new aircraft, the Martin A-30 Baltimore. which were very different from the Italian ones. Buscaglia himself, after nearly 2 years of inactivity, felt the need to master a war machine again. On August 23, 1944, he decided it was time. Perhaps due to overconfidence or an irrepressible desire to feel like a pilot again, he decided to take off alone, without an instructor. There was a seemingly minor technical detail that many believe proved fatal. On American aircraft, the logic of the throttles was the reverse of Italian planes. Pushing them forward meant reducing power, not increasing it. Buscaglia got on board. He gave it gas, or at least he thought he did. The plane taxied but never gained enough speed to take off. It crashed into some trees at the end of the runway and caught fire. Extracted from the wreckage, he was still alive, but his condition was desperate. Transported to the military hospital in Naples, he died the next day, August 24, 1944. The death of the ace of the skies was as tragic as it was ironic. The man who had survived countless battles, the fire of fleets, a shoot-down, and imprisonment, found death in a trivial accident. His last flight was not against the enemy, but against a mocking fate. He had lived twice, only to die on a day of apparent peace, at the foot of Mount Vesuvius. The story of Carlo Emanuele Buscaglia is one of the most incredible and complex in Italian aviation. It's a tale of courage, skill, and destiny. If you're passionate about the stories of Italian heroes, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. And most importantly, tell me what you think in the comments. What struck you most about Buscaglia's life? The figure of Carlo Emanuele Buscaglia is more than just a soldier. He is an icon, decorated with the Gold Medal of Military Valor, 5 silver medals, and the German Iron Cross. His name is etched in the history of global aviation. He was a pioneer, a charismatic commander, and a pilot of unparalleled talent. His absurd death does not obscure his legend, but delivers it to history in all its complexity. Even today, the Italian Air Force honors his memory, and his name, Buscaglia, remains synonymous with the courage and ingenuity of Italian airmen, a legacy that continues to fly high.